This year marks 400 years since English Pilgrims and the Eastern Wampanoags allegedly sat down and broke bread. The meeting, now known as Thanksgiving, is an annual holiday celebrated by many Americans, but not all. Flip open any children's book about that day, and you'll read about the hard-scrabble pilgrims who landed on mostly uninhabited land, and thanks to Native Americans festooned in feathers, they survived and celebrated that feat around wild turkey and corn. Except that's not how it happened. As the Washington Post recently noted, the Wampanoag, a name that means the people of the first light, have lived on these lands as far back as 10,000 years, far longer than any American. By the time they had met the Pilgrims, their community had already been devastated by an epidemic brought to their shores by previous English settlers. So in 1620, when they watched Mayflower strangers invade their land, they thought they would try things differently. And by the spring of 1621, they made contact. In the fall of that year, the Pilgrims, who struggled through a harsh winter and learned how to plant beans and squash thanks to the Wampanoag, celebrated the success of their first harvest. They didn't think to invite the people who helped save their lives. Bet you didn't know that, because they don't tell you that part in the textbooks. In fact, the Wampanoag showed up later, only after the Pilgrims fired off their muskets. Naturally, the Wampanoag heard the gunfire and thought war was afoot. Realizing that wasn't the case, they wound up sitting down with the people who would become their colonizers. For many Indigenous people, Thanksgiving is not a day to be celebrated, but rather a day to be mourned. Because while we gorge ourselves on turkey and stuffing, for Native people, that day represents the start of hundreds of years of genocide, colonization, disease, and forced indoctrination of children stolen from their parents and forced to abandon their language and their culture in government-run boarding schools. With me now is Dana Hedgpeth, Washington Post reporter and member of the Halawa-Saponi Tribe of North Carolina, and Brian Weeden, chairman of the Mashpee Wampanoag Tribe. Thank you both for being here. Really appreciate you. I want to start with you, Dana. Thank you so much for being here this afternoon. And why did you write that piece? What prompted you to do it? There have been a lot of attempts, I think, over the years to sort of reimagine and sort of rediscover what Thanksgiving ought to be. What prompted you to write this piece?
You know, it came about from a conversation with a very good editor at the Washington Post, Linda Robinson, and we were chatting. She said, "How do you celebrate Thanksgiving? I'm Native American. I'm from the Halawa-Saponi Tribe in North Carolina." And I sort of chuckled and said, you know, we don't celebrate the same way you do. Thanksgiving doesn't mean to Native Americans what it does to many others in the country. And so that got us thinking, what's the best way to tell that story? And the 400th anniversary brought about a great opportunity to do that. I was very fortunate to meet Chairman Weeden through introductions and to really listen to their side of the story that, as you said, is so often not shared.
Yeah. And, you know, Chief Weeden, I think that's an excellent point, because I think there is an American tick of sort of looking at the arrival of Europeans here as just a triumph, right? A triumph of will, a triumph of the Mayflower and the Nina and the Pinta and the Santa Maria, and sort of whitewash the fact that there were people here. And then to take those people and just make them, well, those were their friends, and they gave them corn, and then everybody did Thanksgiving. And to wipe out really what was a really tragic history, including for the Wampanoag, of, you know, encountering European settlers getting wiped out by disease, maybe smallpox or whatever germs they were carrying, and then encountering them again and then being colonized. How do the Wampanoag look at Thanksgiving, and what would you be doing on that day?
I think first and foremost, it's important to understand that the Wampanoag people have always been welcoming. One of the reasons why we didn't wipe out the English was because they brought their women and children. We never brought our women and children to fight into battle, so we thought that they had come in peace. It's kind of, you know, ignorant bliss on our side, I guess, and we were, you know, more welcoming and, you know, taught them how to grow their corn and their crops and to stay here. We've always been welcoming people, and we still are welcoming people. It hasn't really worked to our advantage over the past 400 years. We're now witnessing another pandemic here in the nation with COVID. You know, so all the diseases that come through, we're still having diseases and these problems still today. I would say that, you know, Thanksgiving is a day of mourning. The fact that our tribe only owns half of 1% of our ancestral territory, and 400 years later, you know, we're still waiting for our fair share from the federal government and the Commonwealth, I think is pretty unacceptable.
Yeah, and, you know, I was just looking at Dana Hedgpeth, you write about the division of land and taking what had been vast lands that the Wampanoag had, dividing it up into like 60-acre chunks and defying the culture of these great people who didn't divide land that way and tax it that way. What did you discover about how life has changed for this tribe in the centuries since, and how much of that culture remains? And I'll ask both of you that question, but I'll ask you as somebody who just finished doing this piece.
Well, they are alive and strong. As the chairman said, very welcoming people. And as Frank James, who's a very well-known Wampanoag activist who made a very famous speech in the 1970s, who was dejected, in fact, from giving that speech publicly at the time. But perhaps the best line from his speech was, "Befriending the Pilgrims was perhaps our biggest mistake." Just if you think about that and let that resonate for a moment, it did open up a long, slow, painful process of genocide, taking of lands, taxation, ownership, things that were the antithesis of the very culture that American Indians and the Wampanoags especially prided themselves in. And,
Chief Weeden, you're young. I'm just looking at your age. You're only 28 years old. So you're, a young man who's growing up, both within your tribe and in your culture, but in this country. And I wonder, what do you say to people who just want to move on, who just want to do the tomahawk chop at an Atlanta Braves game, who are like, why are you making such a big deal out of that? Why can't we just do Thanksgiving the way we want to? Including some younger people who don't want to deal with this history and especially don't want to deal with anything like reparations.
I think it boils down to this nation. I mean, look at all the monuments and all these people that we, classify as heroes and our founding fathers. When you actually look into the history of what these people did, President Lincoln was one of the ones who had one of the biggest massacres, of Native Americans in his time. And he wanted to bring the nation together, so he decided to make this a holiday. I think that the country and the nation has played their part, and we don't do a good job at putting out the accurate information. It's very one-sided, and that's why we're here today, to put our story out there so that we can bring awareness to this issue. I think that it's ignorance on a lot of parts, but as young people, I believe that it's our generation that will make that change and start uniting our nation.
Dana Hedgpeth, thank you for writing this very important piece. Hopefully everyone will read it. Brian Weeden, Chief Brian Weeden, Chairman Brian Weeden, more accurately, thank you very much. Really appreciate you for being here. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so that was from Joy Reid's show, the Reid Out on MSNBC. That is from Wednesday, November 24th, 2021. Right at the end, they mentioned President Lincoln and the execution of Sioux Native Americans on the day after Christmas, December 26, 1862, during the Civil War. Associated Press has this article from December 31st, 2018. Lincoln ordered execution of dozens of Sioux warriors, commuted sentences of others. Okay, this is what he's talking about. So if we look quickly at this, and we're coming up here on the break, we'll go back to the phone lines on the other side of the break. So the claim is on social media posts circulating recently stated, quote, on this day, December 26, 1862, 38 Native Americans are executed in the U.S.'s largest mass hanging. The execution was ordered by Abraham Lincoln, President Abraham Lincoln, during the Civil War, which is 1861 to 1865. So this is true, and there's numerous sources on this, numerous information you can research on this. 38 Native Americans were hanged on December 26, 1862, as ordered by he was then President Abraham Lincoln. They say former President Abraham Lincoln, but he was president at the time, Abraham Lincoln, after the 1862 Dakota War, which was also known as the Sioux Uprising of 1862. The sentences of 265 others were commuted. Okay, so here's what happened. A military commission sentenced 303 Sioux Native American fighters to be executed after deadly fights white settlers and soldiers had with Indians, Native Americans angry about the loss of their homeland and lack of access to food. Harold Holzer, Holzer, author of several books on Abraham Lincoln, told the Associated Press in a telephone interview that Lincoln reviewed, quote, every one of these capital cases, end quote. Now, according to reporting by the Associated Press, the original trials were a farce, some taking as little as 5 minutes. In addition, the Native Americans were denied counsel, denied attorneys, and did not understand what was being said. After the review, President Abraham Lincoln decided there was evidence that 39 Sioux Indians were guilty of murder or rape during the uprising and ordered their execution. The remaining 264 sentences were commuted. In addition, one of those sentenced to be executed received a reprieve before the December 26, 1862 hanging of 38 Sioux warriors. Lincoln went against the advice of fellow Republicans in Minnesota, who warned that showing mercy would, quote, carry a large political cost. Showing mercy would, quote, carry a large political cost, and that, quote, lessons needed to be taught, end quote, according to Holzer. All right. You listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes.
And, you know, like I said, to say it's a damn shame is an understatement. My question to you, though, is, okay, now I know, now what? You know, how do I introduce this to, you know, family members and you know, people that I know, people that I encounter? Like Miss Reid stated, you know, people don't want to hear that. They don't even want to hear about their own ancestors. They don't want to hear that. Can you just pass the potatoes out? Who made the potatoes out? Can you just pass the turkey?
Right.
I don't want to hear that. So
I think.
So how do we, you know,
right.
How do we move our community towards a more honest and authentic narrative?
Right. Okay. So the way to do that, and we got other callers too. So the way to do that, I think, is one, read these articles that I'm sharing with you, because this deals with the history, and it deals with a lot of history that we have not been taught. And it ties into Native American history. There's a really good one from Washington Post. There's another one I'm about to share that I usually share each year. And this deals with what really happened at the first Thanksgiving, the Wampanoag side of the tale. But a lot of what happened, there's similarities between the history of African people and also Native Americans as well.
Right.
And
Exactly.
when we look at books like The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence by Dr. David Imhotep, and I've had him on this show a number of times, African people were here even before Native Americans came into existence. We were here in this land, and we call the United States of America, even before Native Americans came into existence. So our land was taken, Native Americans' land was taken, but there's also an intermixing of African people and Native Americans as well. And some of the Africans who were here who are already here when European settlers get here, or European colonizers get here, some of those groups are going to be reclassified as Native Americans. Okay, so if you don't understand that history, you won't know what happened to those populations and deal with name changes. Okay, and then also you're going to have some Native Americans who were enslaved by the English and taken into England. Okay, that history also happens as well.
Oh, wow.
So, and one of them was Squanto, because Squanto was the one who, Squanto was a Native American who showed the Pilgrims how to fish and how to grow corn and things like this. But he was a Native American who was captured in this land in the Massachusetts area by the English, taken into England, and he's going to be able to get away and come back to his people here, and he learns English. Okay, Squanto learns English.
Right.
So
right.
you're going to have these things that happen. Also, I encourage people to read African People and European Holidays and Mental Genocide by Dr. Shakamusa Barashango.
Right.
Book 1 and book 2, because in book 1, the first thing he starts talking about is historical roots of what he calls Misgiving Day. And he talks about the Emoja Karamu, which is the Unity Feast, and for African people to replace Thanksgiving with the Unity Feast. And so, like I said, I'm not against us coming together with family and things like this on Thanksgiving Day, because a lot of people are off that day. And, you know, these are family members you may not have seen all year. And yes, we're going to eat things like this, but that's different than this whole concept of Thanksgiving, et cetera. And yes, we're going to be thankful when we come together. I'm not against us being thankful for what we have and we're still alive and things like that. I'm not against that either. Okay. But that's different than this whole concept of Thanksgiving, which is celebrated to basically inspired by and commemorate that first Thanksgiving that we were told took place in 1621. And then the National Day of Thanks, it becomes a national holiday in 1863, declared by President Lincoln, but it was inspired by Sarah Josepha Hale. And Sarah Josepha Hale launched a 36-year campaign to have a National Day of Thanks. And she's the woman who wrote the nursery rhyme, Mary Had a Little Lamb. That's Sarah Josepha Hale. She's known as the mother of Thanksgiving. We're going to come to that in just a minute. Okay, Jatan, keep listening, all right? Thanks for calling. Keep listening.
I sure will. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Also, you can support the African History Network through PayPal and Cash App. We have the information right on the homepage of my website. If you scroll down, $ the AHN show through Cash App, and through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show. This is our Cash App. Tag $ the AHN show, SHOW. When you go to it, it'll say Michael and show my picture there. Okay. These are some fake African History Network Cash App accounts that have been stealing money from us. And I put our tag right here. Here's our link to our Cash App, QR code. Okay, so you can support us there if you want to donate support us $5, $10, $15, $25, $50, $100, whatever it is. It definitely helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, pay some of the bills, and broadcast the Sunday night show also. And here's our link for PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show. Okay. All right. So look, we have to get out of here. Remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. We're kind of forever. We'll talk to you next time. Peace.